is going on? Howdy, howdy. What's happening, everybody? What's happening, Alicia? For those of you who are just joining us, looks like, well, everybody's just joining us because we just started the show. I don't know if any of my Patreons are already here, but if you are, I'm going to send a nice shout out to my Patreons. Um, yeah. Let's see, let me send my link out to the folks. Doobly-doo. Not in text. Let's see, that's probably going to get deleted. It's fine. It says we've got 3 people. I'm probably one of those on my phone. We have Alicia here. Wonder who else is here. Don't be shy. No need. Let's go to the Blue Ranch group and put my link out there. Check this out. Is this it? No. Let's see. Show your work. That's it. Creepy stories. There we go. Alright, well, I usually like to get a couple people in here before we start doing stories. Because then you have a bunch of people asking, well, what are you talking about? And what's going on? And this and that. And it's just a cluster. How are you doing, Alicia? We're drinking some agua. Because Chappy does not need alcohol right now. Let me pull my legs up. Hopefully you can hear me just fine. No echo and all that stuff. Let me do a quick sound check. Because I'm not running my sound or my microphone through my normal. What am I talking about? Just showing up. What's happening, Yandere? How you doing? Oh, that was creepy looking. How to cook Christmas dinner for an alien. I'm trying to check my sound. So if you bear with me, you're gonna hear double sound for a moment. What's happening, Yandere? How you doing? No, it's all right. All right, we're good. Well, Alicia meet Yandere. Yandere meet Alicia. Yandere is a beautiful artist. Hey, it's Scratch and Bow on the go. TGD. What's happening, Bubba? You sound creepy. I am creepy. I try to be. That's just always what I do. Make sure my creepy mustache is all set up proper. Hang on. I gotta give it a couple little twists. I'll probably be fiddling with this thing all night. I haven't done a show in a couple days. I know I always promise you guys shows and I never do them. Hi, man lady. Well, how you doing? You're calling me man lady, right? It's fine. I don't think I'm very androgynous looking. But I did make that joke today. I turned you off. Did you turn off? Whatever. There's my agua. Y'all be nice to Alicia. I know her. She's the niece to the daughter of my cousin's wife. She's good people. But y'all are usually good people, so I don't think I have to warn anybody. We are going to there's a story that I wanted to do that I got to find again. But it's I'm a drug dealer and never buy what I'm selling. But I've got to find it. Favorites. Doobly 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 doo. And you shouldn't. Okay, here it is. I'm a drug dealer, and you shouldn't smoke what I'm selling. This did really well in No Sleep. So let's find that. How about I apostrophate it right? Or spell shouldn't properly. L-T and T. Smoke what I selling. There we go. Yeah, had 6,000 upvotes about 3 days ago. Still looks like we're missing people. She's your father's brother's friend's roommate's cousin's friend from college. Gotcha. Exactly. Hey, Mama. How you doing? Hey, Julie. What's going on? I hope everybody say hi to my mama. My mama is in here. How are you doing, Mama? I hope all is well for you. I heard my baby brother went and had Thanksgiving with you and Dad. That must have been cool. Oh, she says hi to Julie first. Oh, she said hi to me. She said hi, son. Well, I was watching a video before you came. Well, I appreciate you being here. I always do. We're up to 5, but we're usually up to a little bit more than this. I wonder what the deal is. Maybe everybody's all lethargic from this weekend. I know I hung out with family all weekend. It was good. Not my mama. Hey, Mikey Lugo. ¿Qué pasó, mijo? How you doing, Bubba? Hopefully all is well. Welcome to the show. You came out of nowhere. You sure did. That's fine. Oh. You got 634 subscribers. Oh, I'm already subscribed to you. Let me see. What do you got here? You got dad videos. A few dad videos. The Cult of the Ghost Revamped version 2. Guys, you should check out Mikey Lugo. Thanks. I've been very hyped for this whole month. I watch Black Friday fights on YouTube. Oh, uh, for 2019, are people still fighting? There's no we're gonna get to stories in a second, but there's no current game stations or really any reason to fight. You were watching Drunk History. Drunk History is always fun. You call them extreme mosh pits? Yeah. I, I mean, they really are. Just set them to music, you know, and everybody goes nuts. let's uh, let's tell a story. Where's it at? Here's the link for the story, as usual. Reading's hard, okay? We all know that. It just is. I dare you to react to it. Oh, to your recent dad videos? I won't do it yet, but if you join my Discord and post the video, PM me the video, Well, you know who I am. I'm Chappy on the Discord. Just PM me the video you want me to react to, and I'll tell you. Yevlin, Chappy, Yevlin, how you doing? I don't really get really loud in this stream, but it's fine. Let me see here. Make sure the sound's down. There we go. Now I have the chat in two areas. All right, you will. Give you a second. 10-4, bud. I appreciate it. Oh, put these pillows behind me. And how about I charge my phone through the wall? Because it charges faster. Hey, Beast Drew, long time no see. How you doing, bud? And I just got a PM. Doobly doobly doo. This is only a test. There we go. I went kind of dark there for a second. Chappy ASMR. Uh, I'm never really ASMR. What's going on with my stream? Why does it look like I'm really dark? Oh, because I had the screen open. Yeah, there we go. Well, you guys are going to hear some of my Discord sounds. Mikey, I will check those out. Thank you. But we are going to tell a story that I was working on the other day that I just couldn't do it. I'm going to be flat out honest with you. English is hard. But, it's that same story. I've posted twice now. And this is, I'm a drug dealer. And you shouldn't smoke what I'm selling. And I've got to watch my stream. Everyone just blows Chappy's Discord up. Ah, it's alright. I closed it for now. I went dark. There we go. Okay, I can see. Claps hard. Alright, well this story is by Christian Wallace, Wallis, 3 days ago. On Discord, no sleep. I need to finish putting up the tree and decorate it. Well, you do that, Mama. You have a wonderful night. And if you're around later, we'll chat. If I can give anybody any advice, is be nice to their mama. It's the woman who made you. Here we go. It starts with people needing some help. Might be a girl you like, or some guys you're trying to impress. Or even just an old buddy you bump into on the street. The important thing is you've got a reputation for smoking weed and they like some. Maybe they're new to town or they want to throw a party and want to impress someone as a one-off, but they need you. They need your help. That's what you do. You start to help. It's like help when buying weed on their behalf, and then you start changing extra because it soon becomes regular and it's more than just a favor. Then you realize you're putting so much time you need to find someone else who sells large amounts at discounts. Eventually you realize weed won't cut it. The margins are too low and the work's too hard. By now, you have 4 phones, way too many friends on Facebook, a day job that you fucking hate, and so much time goes by into feeling the dealer, or being the dealer, that you've given up hopes of just being a hobby. Oh, and of course, you have your own addiction to take care of. Most of the time, you're lucky to even break even. But selling weed helps. Maybe the guy you buy off of mentions mushrooms or MDMA or something else that's common. But the important thing is to remember that it's a surprisingly short road to heroin. It pays the most, weighs very little, and you don't have to worry about that spreading yourself too thin. Now you'll be able to get a little book of real valuable repeat customers. And if you're like me, you might just have had enough sense to never try your own product. But it's still a problem. Every person who buys is a ticking time bomb, a walking liability. And every day you work this job, you're not doing something else, something with prospects. And it only takes one arrest to fuck it all up. It only takes one idiot to lead to the arrest. See, what I did was I went after a certain kind of client, someone who through lucky and opportunity is rich enough to ride their addiction, someone who doesn't look like an addict, if you get what I mean. They're hardly immune to the effects of the addiction, and consequences are a lot less severe of the upper classes. Good thing that applies to the dealers too. It's nice to have clients who don't die every few years. That's not to say their health is under my number one priority. But they've known most of them for doing 8 years. I've helped them more, fix broken down cars, find dates, rehearse presentations, pick up deliveries, and on my own occasion, I even babysat once for their niece while they got high in the garden shed. Sadly, I would have to admit that they're my closest friends. And about a fortnight ago, something bad happened to each and every one of them. Normally, I like to sell my goods on a Sunday. No open door policy and no phone calls. I keep a consistent routine. It avoids trouble. But last Tuesday, I had one of them knocking at my door. I was pretty pissed off to have this guy, Rolo, don't ask me, it's not his real name, turns up out of the blue. That's not how I like to do things, and it was pretty damn close to not opening the door. But as you might guess, junkies are resistant to denial, and he wasn't going to go out of the way of politeness. So in the end, I let him in. But to my surprise, he wasn't there to buy. He came straight in and put a brick of the stuff in my hand, leaving me totally speechless. He then went on this winding rant about his childhood, the things like his mother did to him, and the scars she left after being a long, long time. He eventually got to the point. I found it, Rolo told me. I found it in the gutter on the side of the road. Way, way out in the middle of nowhere. I was driving home and my wife, oh man, I just spotted it. What a weird thing, right? My headlight caught it and I was like, wait, was that? No fucking way. But it was. Just a brick of the stuff waiting for me to dish it in the middle of nowhere. And he paused and bit down on his thumb so hard I thought he was going to snap it off like a baby carrot. I'll kill myself if I have this much, he said. I know it. You know it. Everyone fucking knows it, man. You can't give me all of this. You can't. I looked at the brick and realized that I'd be dead within a day. And you've been so good to me. How much do I owe you? Like seriously. All those times? You don't owe me anything, I said. You've been paid up for years. It's not about that, though, he replied. It's about the gesture. You helped me. So, here's what I'm thinking. You take this and you sell it. Any money you split it with me, and then I'll use the money to buy more stuff off you when I need it. That way I never have enough on me to just go crazy. You know, I can't even tell you how much strength this took, by the way. I've been driving the streets for like 5 hours just thinking this through carefully. I took the elevator up here 3 times, but I know it's what I need. I can't. I can't leave this place with that brick. I'll kill myself. I weighed it up in my hands, and it was easily worth $1,000. It was, it was easily worth $1,000, and I had to admit that had made sense. There was no way any addict could be trusted with that much, least of all him. And just to reiterate, it was worth a shitload of money. You found this? I asked, clearly incredulous. I glanced at the gold leaf symbol stamped on the side, failing to recognize it but feeling an intense anxiety in the presence. In a fucking ditch, he said, his face elated. Someone must have chucked it, whoosh, straight out the window. All right, I agreed. This is a good deal, I added, hesitating for reasons I couldn't say. But I decided it was just being irrational. I was just being irrational. By all accounts, this was a good fucking surprise. Free money is always a good surprise. Come on, I told him. I'll weigh a little out for you. Instinctively, he reached into his pocket and started to count notes. It's your stuff, I snapped, and he laughed at himself. But I just shook my head and took it in my scales, where I began taking off just a little to give to Rollo. Pretty soon, I was left sitting in my flat, on my own, staring at a brick with a sense of confusion, partly at the preceding events, partly at the strange pit in my stomach, and partly because that symbol made my eyes hurt. Over the next weeks, that brick was sold in pieces to each of my customers, slowly whittling itself down until about half was left. Bit by bit, I sold it. All 11 of my regulars, and then bit by bit, none of them came back. When it came to Sunday, a day where my phone is normally lit up and my door is fucking tambourine, there was silence. I tried calling, but there was no answer for each of them. I cannot stress to you how weird this is. Heroin addicts don't skip appointments with me. It just doesn't work like that, not unless they're dead. And that has a harrowing thought to have. All of them? Man, even back when I took a long, hard look at that brick, something about it had bothered me the entire time. And now I was truly worried. Do you know what they'd do to me if I sold bad drugs to 11 different middle-class Londoners? One of them was a blonde girl in her 20s. Fucking blonde. Do you have any idea how bad this would be for me? My first stop was the news. At least 3 of the people I sold were Oxford graduates with banking jobs, and I figured they'd died. They'd be in the papers somewhere. People love those kind of scandalous stories. So I started Googling names until I got a hit. It was not what I expected. That blonde I just mentioned, I'm going to call her Milky Bar. Anyway, she turned up in one paper, having gone missing. Last seen a few days before. It was a plea for her husband and parents, asking for her to come back home. The paper mentioned her addiction, and they were worried she'd relapse or worse, died. Well, I was worried too. But what I knew that they didn't was that Milky Bar had a small flat she rented in a friend's name where she smoked before going to work. I also happened to have a key for my misguided attempt at seduction. Long story. I had an address book and access, and I rushed there, hoping to God I'd find her parting her tits off or handcuffed to a bed, deep in withdrawal. If only. I entered quietly only to find a dingy shithole in a high-rise apartment. That was a huge step down from the last time I'd been there. Somehow there were signs of decay. I mean, 10 plus years of rotten decay. Wallpaper was peeling. The ceilings were yellow. Pipes had rusted. Plaster had chipped. The windows had faded. I'd been there just a year before. It had all been newly decorated flat. It wasn't squalor that had done the damage. No, it was derelict, broken down, the old way houses are. Nothing about it made sense to me. I triple checked the address, but was sure enough that was the right place. So I kept looking, eventually found Milky Bar. At least I figured it was her because of the clothes. Really, I guess I found all was a pile of bones in a sundress with some faint straw-colored hair. Her skull mouth was wide open, the sockets empty. It just looked like she was in pain. And the porcelain tub was all stained dark red, looking like an awful lot like a puddle of blood. I felt like I'd stumbled into a crypt, the way her bones looked brittle with age, with little teeth marks from rats. This was a bad attempt at faking her death, I wondered. After a little more poking around, I found some papers stuffed between her pelvis and dress. I pulled them out and unrolled them, recoiling from the smell, and read. I don't want to put it all in print, but she wrote about some fucked up stuff. Real nasty, messed up things like, I just saw 7 messed up. It nearly made me sick and struggled to understand anything in the moment. I put those crazy words down to her having a messed up, troubled mind. After looking around a bit more and not finding anything, I took the notes and left. At the bottom of the page, she'd sketched a symbol from the brick in my flat that had freaked me out. None of the people, aside from Rollo, could have possibly seen that symbol. And I didn't like it being there, not one tiny bit. It left me shaken. Not because of the potential trouble it might bring, but because I was worried that it was really Milky Bar in that tub, and that something awful had happened to her. So I decided to check up on the others. It wasn't easy, but I managed to visit at least 2 others before morning. The first of the 2 was this guy, I'll call him Snickers, who, if you can believe it, was a professor of English literature at KCL. He was something of a tortured artist when he was younger. And while he later grew up to let go of the artist part of his guarded to be the tortured part, like a tiger protecting her cub. When I first knocked on the door of his own personal little fuck pad, I heard what I'd described as a kind of quiet sobbing and some shuffling. I wound up banging on his door for a good 10 minutes before someone finally let me in, and it wasn't Snickers. This guy didn't even greet me or look surprised. He was a young man in his early 20s, and I'd bet my life that he was one of Snickers' many students' hookups. Not that it mattered, while I followed him carefully, as he held both of his arms and shivered violently, tears streaming down his cheeks. Both of us sat down opposite each other. The first thing he said was not what I expected at all. "What the fuck happened, man?" he said, stifling a sob. "What? Where am I?" he asked. I don't... What the fuck happened, man? Where did we go?" "Where's Snickers?" I asked. "What the fuck? We were all there. You saw exactly what happened, man. They made us watch, all of us, me especially. You saying you don't fucking remember? I think you're mistaken me for someone else, I answered. What happened? Her? The kid stopped and stared at me for a long 10 minutes, or a long minute, before sniffing and pulling his knees, up to his chest, holding them close while he rocked back and forth. His eyes were distant, and when he spoke next, he didn't talk to me. I thought you were Dan, he said. Who are you? I'm a friend of Snickers, I answered. I was worried something had happened. The kid laughed, and for a brief moment I saw a network of cuts leading down his neck to his chest. I don't know, he answered, a quiver in his voice. We were here. We got high and then... Jesus Christ! He broke down, holding his face in his hands and crying. I waited patiently until he could resume. Oh, it was fucking awful, man. You don't even know. They didn't even come. We went to them, man. Floating through, I don't even know, the sky? We just all wound up, washed up on the shore. And then they came and took us. And I thought it was just a trip, you know? Just a bad trip. But it weren't like that at all. Oh, fuck, man, my mom. Oh, my God. How am I even going to explain this to her? We've been gone so long. I looked around for a moment and took in the state of Snicker's apartment, noticing the strange dust that coated everything and the peculiar person-shaped imprint on the sofa. How long were you gone? I asked. You should know, my man. You think they let us keep the fucking clocks? There are the police. Where are the ambulances? It's been a year at least. No, I said. I saw Snickers a few days ago. No. Yes, I answered. No, they kept us there for years, man. I stood up and the boy flinched, but I happily showed him my phone and the date and even let him scroll through the BBC News for a good few minutes. No, 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 he mumbled before looking up at me, pleading. It wasn't just a dream, man. We lived it. We lived it every day for years, all four of us. You don't know what it was like there, the things they did to us, what they did to Snickers. He burst into tears, and this time I realized he wasn't going to recover quickly. I asked him if anyone else was around, and he feebly pointed towards a nearby bedroom door. What I found inside that room was not quite what I expected. You could have hung it on a modern art museum, and no one would have noticed. Milky Bar upset me, but they'd done a good job of convincing myself. It was like a big, elaborate ruse. It's easier to believe than God knows what. I mean, what was the alternative? That those things she had written were true? Years spent taken away and subject to humiliation, degradation, and unspeakable torture? But that room, I couldn't convince myself that it was a ruse. I couldn't rightly say that if Snickers was in there, but whatever it was, it had been a person once. And now it knelt on the bed in a position of supplication. Their face didn't really exist anymore except for a mouth that had been cut so far back in their head that I could glimpse vertebrae. The rest of the skull was smooth, pitted, wrinkled skin, like a person's thumb after being in a long bath. Their skin of their armpits where the arms and torso met had started to melt together, forming a broken webbed joint that forced their arms into prayer. All along their abdomen and back, human teeth had been implanted, only to keep on growing in strange bones that broke apart stitches and surgical staples, turning into grotesque hairy toothy tremors that covered their midriff like barnacles on a ship. They knelt in a pool of crimson liquid that looked much deeper than it was, rising to their belly button. The strange lapping water gave off the strange sensation of looking into an enormous blood-red ocean. At moments, it looked as thin as water. Other times it looked as viscous as slime. Mold. Rising up out of it were 10 different limbs, each one thinning unnaturally until it terminated in a single lonely toe. New joints had been added to them, seemingly at random, so this person was hunched over, their branching legs like an immense mangrove tree rising out of a blood-soaked swamp. And marching up out of the waters was a forest of mushrooms no bigger than my thumb, tiny and identical like neat, orderly buttons, their caps opening and closing in a rhythmic dance that made my skin crawl. And then something twitched in the water, looking for the world like a breaching fish. And I was out of there, unable to even think or reason of what had happened in clear terms. "Look what they did to us, man," the boy screamed as I stumbled past him, tearing open his shirt and revealing a single large black eye symbol in his chest. "It took years to grow that into us. Fucking years," he screamed. His shrill voice followed me all the way down the hall. And with that, I was back in my car shaking, barely able to think. At this stage, I was doing mental backflips to explain what I'd seen, and something they had got in my head that I needed to do was check up on the others. It had to be fake. I told myself. The only way for me to prove it was if I followed things up. I had to know. It's the human condition, and I couldn't walk away. I couldn't retreat. I couldn't possibly accept living in a world where anything I had seen in that flat was real. I drove away from the block way too fast, but eager to find some answers. The closest place next on the list was an office run by a man I'll call Arrow. He fancied himself as a sort of Gordon Gekko, Wolf on Wall Street kind of guy, but he was the richest man I knew, and whip smart too. I hope to God he wasn't in on this bullshit and could offer some kind of help or explanation. Earlier that year he'd given me a security guard for his building, and I luckily fished it out of my dash before going in. He had a floor or two in his massive high-rise, and I got the card out ready to explain why I needed to enter the building at 2 a.m. to some bleary-eyed security guard, only to find the front desk empty. It was a simple flick on a switch to call the elevator, but I couldn't stop staring at the half-drunk cup of tea waiting for the guard. Probably gone to the loo, I thought, before briefly touching the ice-cold cup and calling into doubt. Man, it was dark in there, and unsettling in the way that nighttime offices always are. Any place that goes from busy to quiet, that has that air about it, the sense that once everyone goes home, something slinking off in the shadows to stretch its legs. It felt like I was intruding, but I couldn't bring myself to leave it yet. I was secretly trying to tell myself I had been hallucinating in Snicker's place, and I desperately wanted someone to reassure me that it wasn't true. I used the card to get access to Arrow's floor and walked into the otherwise dead office space. Even though the sky in London isn't very clear, I could still see a full moon hanging over the skyline, following me like an eye as I walked along the enormous windows. Arrow's office was found easily. It was the only one with the blinds pulled shut, unlike the others that were as clear and transparent as a scientist's beaker. His name and title were on full display, and I could have walked right in, but something about the silence unsettled me. There was that sense that something was moving around in those shadows, ducking and scuttling below the cubicles and desks just out of sight whenever I'd turn. So I tried to peek through the blinds of the office first without going in, just to get a sense of what was in there. All I could glimpse was a desk chair facing me, and a dark outline of someone sitting in it. Stealing my nerves, I forced myself to open the door and found a desiccated corpse waiting for me. Although the skin was leathery and dry, pocked and peeling blisters and signs of decay, enough of the features remained that I could easily tell it was Arrow. Unlike the others, it looked asleep, peaceful even. For a moment I stared at him, lost in the silence. When something behind me fell over me, I whipped around, heart thundering. It was Arrow, looking a little younger than when I'd seen him. I was shocked to see him after I'd convinced myself of the corpse's identity. But for a moment I looked back and forth while he stumbled in, stopping to take a breath with his hands on his knees before looking up at me and smiling. "Oh, thank God you're here," he said, panting. "What happened?" I asked. "How long has it been?" "Huh? How long has it been?" he repeated. "I'm amazed any of this is still here." "Not long," I answered. "I spent so long wondering if I'd come back," he said. "I thought I'd never get to see this place again." "What happened?" "Oh, who knows," he said. "It's been so long I can barely remember my own name, let alone." Arrow stared at me, his face wrought with confusion and his eyes pleading. When I told him my name, he looked deeply thankful. "That's right," he said, nodding. "Yes, I remember you now. And did I have a wife?" "No," I said, shaking my head. I almost said something else, standing there so close to him. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Arrow, man, you gonna tell me what the fuck's going on? Who was that in the chair?" "I guess I wound up going somewhere, you know? It was beautiful. You should see it. They gave me everything. Everything I could ever want. Even eternal life. I was there for a longer than just one life." "That," he said, pointing to the body in the chair, "that's the old me. My old shell before they gave me a younger one. They can do incredible things. It was beautiful. But now I'm home." He laughed with relief and gently caressed the carpet. "Home sweet home." He smiled at me, turning into the moonlight for the first time, and an inexplicable wave of revulsion washed over me. I had to swallow it, trying hard to ignore the bile rushing up in my throat. It was hard to see, but something about his pallor unsettled me. "Come on," I said. Let's get you back to your... Once more, a look of confusion briefly flashed across his face, his eyes flickering to his surroundings before landing back on me. Of course, he said. Let's get back to your... Nope. Nope. There we go. Lost it. Of course, he said, nodding slightly. Home. This is... This isn't. I reached down and pulled him up, trying not to wince at the slick feel of his cold palms. Leaning down when I did, I couldn't help but notice a speck of blood across his shoes. They gave you everything? I asked. Oh, everything, he said, suddenly gushing. A human could want for nothing. Oh, the food, the clothing, the knowledge, it was divine. And the women? I asked. Magnificent. Magnificent, he smiled. Good, I said, trying to hold back a cry. Arrow was gay. Let me go get my keys, I said, my voice starting to break. I dropped them a while back. I turned and went to leave, stopping for a moment in the doorway to look at the doppelganger. He was staring at me, his eyes overcome with a frightening intensity. At that moment, I dropped the pretense and ran, making for a twisted path through the office and doing my utmost best to ignore the sounds of the wet footprints behind me. I don't know if he was breathing or panting, but it sounded like a gale wind passing through a beehive. I was desperate to put something between this thing and myself, and for a moment I almost ran to the elevator, but at the last moment images of me slamming my finger on the call button as he shuffled out of the darkness and burst into my mind, and I went for the stairs instead. The first thing I saw when I opened the door were the remains of the security guard. Unlike everything I'd seen so far, something about him, bent over, blood pooling around his shredded entrails, grounded me. He hadn't been altered or butchered. It wasn't like some crazy nightmare. He had been assaulted, and from the looks of it, stabbed repeatedly. I nearly slipped in his blood, but I was careful, managing to shuffle around it before bounding down those stairs, leaping 3 or 4 steps at a time, almost willing myself to fall just in hope that I'd get me down quicker. Above me, that thing burst into the stairwell. I half expected it to taunt me, but it just made those shrill, almost bird-like cries of joy. It wasn't far behind me, and it closed the distance fast. It was barely a single flight behind me when it spread its arms, let out a swine-like squeal, and jumped headfirst in my direction. It hit the concrete barrier hard and broke its neck immediately, falling in a broken pile of muscle and bones just a few feet away. It was like it didn't even know the limits of its own body, and I shuddered at the thought of what it might have been. As it lay there, a small pool of that crimson fluid slowly oozed out of every orifice and formed that strange blood rose thousands of little brown mushrooms, unfolding their caps with the smooth grace of a dancer. Barely a minute later, and the flesh within had started to crumple and hiss, leaving loose skin flecks off bone like clothing in a washing line, and slackening mouth leering at me like a drunken idiot's grin. I don't remember much else from that night. I woke in the driver's seat of my car a few hours later, engine idling at a green light as a van driver went caveman on his horn. I drove home, ready to write this whole mad night off, eager to pretend that it didn't happen. It was something I might have managed were it not for the brick waiting for me in my flat. Now that I've finally caught up with the rest, and I'm left wondering if it's worth checking out the other 8 people, I have maybe a night or more before the police realize that I'm the common denominator for this lot of carnage and misery. And maybe getting ahead of it is only the chance I have of knowing what the hell to do. But today, when I finally collapsed in my bed, I dreamed. I dreamed of a city on a coast with the blood-red waters, a collapsed moon hanging in the sky. I dreamed of things that lived there, filled with ambivalence and cruelty. I saw dungeons and torture chambers filled with people toiling away. And amongst them I saw Arrow, Rollo, Milky Bar, old and frail, beating rocks with stones, while shadow-covered figures grow ready to satisfy strange and unspeakable desires. And when I awoke, I was screaming, that strange brick burning its symbol into my palm. Hey, my cry for help. Hey, horn dog. That was a long story. If you guys want to give me a second, I gotta put my laundry in the dryer. I will have my phone on me. I will chat with you guys. Thank you. I like that one. Give me 1 second. I'm still here. The live's still going. Just let me play some music. Oh, of course it reset. ¿Qué pasó? Yeah, it takes a couple seconds for y'all to catch up to me. From the chat to the... So when I said back to when it turned back on was how long my debate... There we go. I was just talking. That's good. Real professional of me. I should be watching my little needles. But I didn't. I didn't say anything important. I was just saying that if y'all like that story, y'all should go to that link and give it an upvote. I thought that was a pretty good one. How long was that last one? That last one was a pretty long one, wasn't it? I met someone who claimed to be the devil, and I think I believed them. Oh, that's like a 10 scroller. Oh. Let's see what we have for not too long. That last one was about 45 minutes. That last one was a pretty healthy story. Oh. I haven't decided if I'm going to shave this thing off, or shave all this off, or what I'm going to do. Gotta love the mustache. I don't know, you're asking the wrong person. No concept of time. Everybody has a concept of time. I found a diary tucked into a brick at an abandoned psych hospital. Nah, not yet. Let's see here. Let's see what I can find. Highest rated. Here's one. It's called Mr. Widemouth. More long Chappy stories. I don't know if you like those or not. Well, here's this story. It's called Mr. Widemouth. story about his icon. I should write one. Oh, Mr. Widemouth, I get it. um, well, here we go. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and we remained there until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there were fragments in the attic of my brain which belonged to the various homes that we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the block yard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania. And so on. But there is one set of memories which remain as clear as glass, as though they were made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by long sickness I experienced spring, but in my heart I knew they were real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine. Population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I hadn't seen in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of the things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me a ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, awaiting to hear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth by far the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said as I flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy? The little robot with big ears. You can pet it and feed them. They're almost like a real pet." "Oh," Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend." I remembered Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to come check in on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to come see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures that were contained. The third or fourth morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face and gave me a new game we can play. I have a new game we can play, he said. We have to wait until your mother comes to check on you because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game. After my mother delivered me more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under my bed and tugged my hand. We have to go to the room at the end of the hallway, he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbid me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. It was only disgustingly... It's only disgusting... No, it's distinguish. Oh, English is hard. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push and flinged it open. He then beckoned me to look out the ground below. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle the drop was further than 2 stories due to the incline. I like to play pretend up here, Mr. Widemouth explained. I pretend that there is a big soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try. I was 5 years old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my mind. My thoughts as I looked down considered the possibility. It's a long drop, I said. But that's all a part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline. I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. Maybe some other time, I said. I don't have enough imagination. I could get hurt. Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. If you say so, he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. I want to teach you how to juggle, he said. Here are some things you can use to practice. Before I start giving you lessons. I looked in the box. It was full of knives. My parents will kill me, I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room. Objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year. Mr. Widemouth frowned. It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it. I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air. Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one, that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my bed until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me that I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after me being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put my sneakers on and trotted out the back porch, yearning for the feeling of sun in my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look because he said, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house. "It's an abandoned path," he explained. "I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path. It's a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there." I returned to the house wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I had met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck sitting next to my father for a long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old I was beginning to suspect perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like the man that was about to run a marathon rather than one who was expected 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard on you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn on the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood on was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail down that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me. But I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. Hey, Seanza, how you doing, bud? I don't know about that voice I gave Mr. Widemouth, but that's the one I gave him. Let's see what else we got. I'm trying to pop my neck. Vapes. It's alright, bud. You're never late. You just show up when you do. Hopefully everybody's doing good. Horn Dog's back and he's better than ever. Hey now, Horn Dog's back. Oh, Horn Dog. More vapes. Oh, this is a creepy pasta. This isn't creepy. I'm not reading this one. I've read this before. It's a wholesome story, though. It's called An Egg. Ooh, like a inhale and a burp and a hiccup. Weird. Hmm. This one's called The Quiet Sky. All these have YouTube videos attached to them, but screw them. I'm reading them. Bam. I didn't set a timer on my phone. I should probably check that here in a little bit. But it'll be about 2 hours. Oh, it's 9:20 already? Holy crap. Where's the time gone? 6. Hang on a second. I gotta think about this. Let me see here. Wow. Yeah. I got back here at about 7. Wow. Jesus. I mean, it's still early for me. I feel like it's late, but I'm working nights anyways. um, weird water. My water's weird? Here's the next story. The Quiet Sky. You brought that on yourself. Who? What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean. But anyways, let's go to the next one. I just read that. It started when we called out to the stars, into the darkness. We felt so small, tumbling through the vast emptiness while changing. We felt so small, tumbling through the vast emptiness while clinging to the skin of the world, and without a single reason why. We were curious, yes, but ultimately, I think we were just terribly frightened. And we were young, so very young. We were children, and like a lonely, lost child, we did the only thing we could think of to make it stop. We did what we thought we had to do to make the universe make sense. We called for help. For years we scanned the sky for a sign. We sent signals to the stars and the darkest beyond. Are we alone? But the stars are quiet, always so quiet, leaving us to our own makings. But crying children never cease, and neither did we. We sent calls into every corner of space for decade after decade. We refused to believe no one was out there. They had to be, yet, for some unknown reason, they never answered us. Everyone remembers when that changed. They think it responded to the Arecibo message from 1974. The response to the Arecibo message was received almost 3 months ago in two separate signals. The first part of the message was received at the Hat Creek Radio Observatory in California. The Allen telescope array picked up what sounded like static interference that continued on for over an hour. It consisted of unintelligible screeching and buzzing sounds that continued without pause for over an hour. The meaning of this message was never discovered, if it had one. The only thing we knew was that the signal's origin came somewhere from the Hercules constellation near Messier 13. As soon as the signal stopped, the real message began. We made contact that day, and we were asked a question. Who is there? It came not through the radios, but as a voice inside all of our heads. Asked the question to us all. I heard it. My wife heard it. The young heard it, and the old heard it. Even the deaf heard it. Everyone, everywhere, heard this voice whisper that question in our heads, in every language on earth. I remember it almost too clearly. It asked in that familiar, yet indescribable voice that's always in my mind. It's like one of my own thoughts had gone rogue and had decided to speak directly to me. The world seemed to stop as everyone listened for what came next. Where are you? The heavy question seemed to linger in our minds for hours after, and then for days, and then even weeks. That day changed everything. There were the doubters from the very beginning, and the holy ones who claimed that God had spoken to us all, and that the time to repent was now. There were those who claimed they'd heard nothing, and those who claimed that the aliens had given them their own secret message. And of course, there were those who truly believed that we had been contacted for the first time by an extraterrestrial race like us, one ready to communicate, ready to lead us out of the dark. We were wrong. We never made contact with alien life, at least nothing comprehensible or discernible to human understanding. The stars are vast, and in their vastness our voices had touched the ears of something truly incomprehensible, something hungry and malevolent, the voice. We realized our mistake when the grounded started I'm sorry, when the ground started to groan. Beneath our feet everywhere, the ground seemed to groan. The muffled sound shook the dust and dirt below us. No one knew what was causing it, not until not until the calls started coming in. The graveyards were screaming. All at once the dead had started screaming. Every deceased man, woman, and child was turning in their graves. All the animals did too. Every day, or every dog, every cat, everything that had ever walked this earth. The cries of ancient whales shook the seas, and the shrill screeching of birds echoed the forest. The casks shook, and the morgues howled. The voices stopped together in an ancient leaving of the world, in an amplified silence. In their absence, a new sound was filled the air. The voice returned. I hear you. It came as a whisper from behind, an ominous yet oddly playful presence that felt so close but was truly still so far away. It let us breathe in the silence for about a minute before it made us a promise. It was a promise we all knew to be true. I am coming. The voice was gone, and the air was again filled with screams. This time they were from the living. After the voice had gone, we were left to our own devices. Millions panicked, and rightfully so, as chaos took hold of the streets. Many would die in the violence and gunfire that night. They would be known as the raptured before long. The rest of us were the condemned. They could only wait. The screaming dead was only the first side of the effects that was felt as the voice approached. The closer it got, the more we felt. The first night after the screaming, we noticed the stars bleed for the first time. A section of the western sky turned black, blacker than the night. It was only truly visible because of the ring of stars around it. The light from those stars had turned red. They seemed to bleed across the sky, like food coloring dropped into water. Their light swirled and flowed around the edge of some unseen mass. I knew then that I was staring into the face of the voice. Our scientists claimed that nothing was there, that their radar and scans always came up empty. Their telescopes could see nothing but the darkness in this section of space. However, the proof was right in front of us. As every night that ring of darkness got wider, and the more stars bled the sky, we watched it come. As each night passed, the black spot would widen, and more stars would distort and bleed around it. During the day, a new hell would greet us. The side effects would worsen. The day always brought something new. I'm sure most of what happened will go untold and unknown. The animals started disappearing, all of them. No tracks, traces, or bodies left behind. Pets would run away, some violently so. They all retreated, never to be seen. The forests were left abandoned, the oceans empty. The air was left silent. left seemingly empty and lonely. They left like water receding from the shore just before the tsunami breaks. One day, about 2 weeks ago, scientists tried to talk to the voice again. They hoped perhaps to reason with it. They told it about what had happened to our world and asked it a question. The scientist begged. It didn't speak. When asked what the voice sent a response. The next night the skies lit up with streaks of fire. It was alight for hours, blazoned with orange and red. We didn't realize the effects until the next day when the televisions turned to static and the telephones refused to work. We had sat watching as all satellites were knocked out of the heavens. After that, reports came, rumors and rumblings. Sanity, a thing of the past. The air chilled and weighed us down. The voice was nearly here, and everyone felt it. It rained for a week after the satellites fell. The rain was salty and mired with an unknown filth that turned the grass black. Maybe the satellites tracked something back with them when they hit the sky. No one knew for sure. All we know is that it fell from the clouds black as charcoal that blotted out the sun like liquid ash. Darkness fell upon us for days. When the clouds went away, the skies were empty. There were no clouds, yet the sky hung low and gray. If the sun were anywhere in the sky, it never made itself known. Even it had abandoned us. Each day grew slowly darker and darker until night and day became almost the same. Some people would claim later that they'd seen things in the dark, creatures with gangly limbs and crooked faces, lurking in the corners of their vision. They were tall, white creatures that looked mottled or rotten through their transparent skin. Appearances would last for a second or two before vanishing without a trace. Some believed this was the first step in the alien invasion, but the rest of us didn't know what to think. We just knew that it was nothing that simple or benign. They must have been hallucinations, just more madness to endure. But ultimately, as harmless as anything else, as harmless as the screams of the dead and the missing animals and the dying sky. Appearances slowly increased in duration and number. I think everyone saw them at least once, but I don't think a single person would ever guess why they were truly here. They never touched nor spoke to anyone. They certainly never harmed anyone. Most who got good looks at them described them as mournful and sorrowful looking. Some even claimed that creatures watched over them at night, and others even claimed that it seemed as if the creatures were sorry for them. Once claimed to have seen one prostrate upon the ground, hands clasped above its head. He said it was praying for us. Praying was no help. The churches and places of worship that had divided us so long ago failed to bring hope to any in the end. The voice let them pray and beg for a while. But just days ago, the voice ended it all. No one questioned how, for at this point, nothing that happened surprised anyone anymore. But on the final day, all books of worship burned. Every last Bible, every Quran, everything. People rushed to their centers of faith, but found no solace. The churches and temples had suffered the same fates, if not worse. The people were left abandoned by their great hopes. There were rumors of churches all over the world, with walls forming from the bodies of those who sought refuge. They were merged into the walls, stuck to them like flies in a trap. They died still pleading for hope, but they were beyond God's help. The rest of us had learned to stop begging. We waited. The final message came from beyond the sky. It fell upon us. The voice echoed and it spoke the simple truth. I am here. There is a darkness beyond the horizon, the likes of which I doubt has ever been seen. It brings with it the screams of countless souls, and it moves fast. The stars are dying now, and I know they'll never be seen again. The light is dying so fast. I leave this not as a warning, no. It's far too late for that. Instead, consider this the last realization, the last humanity will ever know. For we used to wonder whether or not we were alone and lost, but never whether we were safe and hidden. The universe is infinite, and our understanding was significantly more finite. We should never have beckoned to the darkness. Instead, we should have clung to the light and closed our eyes every time we turned to the void. As the final minutes approach, I hold one final truth to be certain. I know why the skies were always so quiet. So you guys said Nathan's live right now? Let me go to YouTube.
Around. I don't have it memorized. And I was like, oh, I go look.
He's outside a bar. Yeah, I see that. I just gave him a guilt trip. I was like, so you're going to stream when I'm streaming? Anyways, I can end the stream. We can go over to Nathan's stream. I have to check on my laundry anyways. Well, I don't know if he said anything.
Daryl Hammond was wearing a dumb hat. I'm not, you see, I wasn't making that up. It really was. I was like, I forgot his name at first, but I was just like, I texted in the chat, I'm like, SNL guy is in.
He does voiceover for the intros now.
Oh, really?
He still works on that, but he does.
See? AJ agrees with me. Daryl Hammond was wearing a dumb hat. Right. He was sitting behind us.
No, whatever. Yeah. If y'all want to hang on 1 second, I gotta check on my laundry. I'll burb. Actually, I might end the stream. Um, Not because Nathan's streaming, but because I still got a lot of things to do. Anyways, if I stream again, it'll be late. Um, it'll be a little bit later than right now, because I'm on nights. But hey Lauren, I will, after I do all my chores and stuff, I may come back and stream again. And we'll see if I can get people back in here. But, yeah, I gotta do some chores and stuff, some adulting. Anyways, guys, thank you for coming to the stream. Hit me up on the Discord, and yeah, maybe we'll do some more creepiness soon. Well, right on, guys. You know I love you all, and we'll be back.